All right, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Thanksgiving episode of Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. And my friend that always answers when I need him, the Oddman from the Oddcast. What's going on, dude? Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, man. Thank you for inviting me. I'm sober. I did not drink and I did not overeat. It's amazing. So I don't know if I'm getting smarter as I get older or maybe some other freak
Nice.
thing happened.
I'm not a clean. I've noticed that some people are good at the clean plate club, and I
Yeah.
am not good at the clean plate club. I always go for two, and then I don't finish my plate, and then I gotta either throw it away. So I gotta do better with not taking a full second plate.
Well, I had to go to two places. And so I was kind of full the second meal. I wasn't super hungry. You know how that goes. So
Yeah.
yeah, it all
Did,
worked out good,
did
though.
you cook any, or did you just bring stuff where you went?
Yeah, my wife did some cooking, which she usually doesn't, but she started to cook in the last couple of years.
Nice.
And people aren't getting poisoned, so she's continuing to do it. And so yeah, that was nice. I didn't really have to do anything, but
Good.
yeah, just carry the stuff in.
Oh, well, that's the man's job. He's carrying heavy
Right.
things. I have to cook in our house, and dude, I'm a crock pot man, and
Yeah.
we eat the same things. I gotta learn to expand my culinary capabilities.
Yeah, I do a lot of cooking here too, man, quite a bit, and I use that crock pot all the time. Just throw it in, hit the button, and you
It's perfect, dude.
right.
Yeah. So I told you, everyone, listen, I was on my friend Bob's show last night, and I was talking about Program to Kill a little bit. And it's always, I said this the last time you were on, you're always like two steps ahead of me of where I'm going in my research. And you've done a lot of work on Michael Aquino and the Temple of Set. And again, I got to start listening to you, dude. I hear yours, and I'm like, all right, well, I've seen Michael. Wasn't he on on Oprah, or he was on some Dr. Phil or something?
He was definitely on Geraldo, and I think he was on Oprah too. I'm not sure. I
Okay.
think he made like kind of a round of talk shows back in the day in the early to mid '80s.
Yeah. So I'm gonna pull up a picture. So Michael Queen, he comes up in Program to Kill as a sicko, a child rapist. He has his hand in Iran Contra. So who is Michael Aquino, I guess, for people that are listening?
Yeah, I had heard the name bannered about ever since I got into conspiracies, but I never really looked into the guy. I only knew that he was affiliated with Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan. And I'd seen this famous picture of him, Anton LaVey, and one of the guys from the Rat Pack, Sammy Davis Jr. There's a
Really?
famous picture of them, and apparently Sammy Davis went to the Church of Satan. He was all into it. He was actually a Knight of Malta too, interestingly enough. But
Hmm.
or at least he can be pictured with one of the Malta capes on in some pictures. But anyway, I decided to look into him for whatever reason, and I had no idea how complicated the guy was going to be. I just thought he was going to be another Anton LaVey, kind of one of these guys who was kind of did the whole Satanist thing to get laid and to get attention and to kind of shock people.
Right.
And when I got to looking into him, his story is that he was in the military and he lived in, I think it was San Francisco at the time. And Anton LaVey, he saw him and his crew leaving this movie, Rosemary's Baby. Would you tell me I have to watch? I've never
Oh
watched
my,
it.
that's right. You haven't seen it,
I haven't
dude.
seen it.
Oh, Rosemary. I'm not a movie guy. That's one of the few movies. It was filmed outside where the Beatles guy got killed, all that stuff. But
Oh
continue.
wow. Yeah, so I guess he asked the clerk, "Hey, who was that entourage?" I guess because they were dressed in black and they looked wild, and he told him it was the Church of Satan founder Anton LaVey. So, long story short, like a few months later, he looked him up. I guess he tried to meet him at the Black House, which was their big. It was kind of his domain, his like headquarters, and he said that it said on the door, "If this sign's up, don't knock." So he kind of forgot about it, and maybe like 6 months later, LaVey was in town again at a speaking engagement. He went, he loved it. He got to meet him. They became instant friends, and he immediately joined the Church of Satan. and still in the military, but he began to work his way up quickly. Like he was only in the Church of Satan, I believe, 7 years, and I think this was 1960. I think it was 1965 when he met LaVey, if I'm not mistaken. And he had already by the end of that 7 years, he'd worked his way up to be like the second in command, if you want to say it like that, of the Church of
Yeah.
Satan. So he was writing rituals and different things like that, like from the get go, like a Diablicon. He wrote that while he was in Vietnam, stationed in Vietnam, sent it to LaVey, and LaVey instantly put it in the Church of Satan. So he was a pretty important member. And where LaVey was kind of more of a showman and kind of a vaudeville, kind of like kind of like a goth kind of circus, you know, a circus leader or whatever. Um, the Aquino was really, really intelligent, super intelligent, probably a genius. And so he kind of brought that intelligent side to the Church of Satan and incorporated it in there. And again, long story short, they had a falling out because LaVey wanted to kind of start charging money outright to be able to work your way up through the different degrees of the Church of Satan. And Michael Aquino thought that was terrible. He did not like it at all, or at least that's his story. And so he contacted a bunch of the elder members, and they all left. They all left immediately because LaVey didn't want to talk about it. He was just hell bent on doing that. And they
Was
started.
is it still the same Church of Satan that's like verified on Twitter? Is that LaVey's Church of Satan, or do you think it's not the same thing?
That's a good question. I've never looked into it to see if it's still affiliated with LaVey in any way and like still uses the same rituals and stuff like that. I know that Marilyn Manson at one time anyway was affiliated with it. He was a Church of Satan minister. Some say he was the leader, but I don't know if that was true or not. I know the one guy that Isaac Weishaupt talks about a lot that wrote the book about the left hand path. I'm blanking on his name.
I've seen that book.
Yeah, blanking on the guy's name, but he was actually one of the leaders after LaVey stepped down, or excuse me, after Aquino stepped down. But not this. I think the one right after Aquino, they called the guy Anubis. That's all they called him. So I don't know what his real name
Oh,
was.
good
But
nickname. Good nickname.
yeah, right. But people didn't really like him too much because he changed a bunch of things, and
Okay.
so it was kind of a controversy. And I think that was around the time that the whole other controversy with Aquino happened, where he was stationed in the military. He was stationed at this base. Oh my gosh, I'm
It's in
blanking on the.
Omaha, right?
Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm blanking on this. I just was reading about it a few minutes
It's
ago.
funny
The
you say this.
Presidio, the
Oh, okay.
Presidio, and so there were these allegations from these children that somebody had been doing bad things to them. We'll just put it that way, and they actually implicated Aquino and his wife. And so this was a huge controversy, and it opened up all these other allegations from different military bases all around the country, even West Point. And so that's really what Aquino's more well known for, I think, than anything else, even though he was never convicted. Eventually,
Right.
they did take his wife's name off of the charges, but his name is still on there. And apparently, the little girl who was the first one to accuse Aquino and his wife explained how their house looked on the
Yeah.
inside, and she called the people who abused her Mikey, and his wife's name is Lilith, but she called her something else. It was like
What are
a
the
pet
odds of
name.
that, right?
Oh, exactly. I'm sure that's probably not even her real name, right?
Yeah.
She probably changed
For
it to
anyone,
that.
Lilith is in the Bible, she's the first, or what? She
Supposedly the first woman before Eve, but
yeah.
I don't know if there's a lot of
I think she wasn't subservient or something. That's what they say. I don't know who follows that. I don't know if it's like in the Zohar or in the Kabbalah, where that story is, but
yeah, yeah, and apparently it's related to a succubus and those
yes,
kind of things,
exactly.
I
Yeah.
guess.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so that kind of haunted him his whole life. After that, of course, as it would anybody, I guess. But of course, he denied those charges, and even wrote a book about it. But I don't know, man. I go back and forth because the guy is so complicated. He had all of these awards, and he kept going back to college, even up until the last 10 years of his life. He continued to go to college and get new degrees. Still was in the military up
Hmm.
until about the last 10 or 15 years of his life, and was very highly decorated. And he wrote the book Mind War, which was all about psyops, psychological warfare. But he wrote a handful of books. And one of the weird things that I didn't know until I got to looking a little deeper is he went back through and actually rewrote the Satanic Bible. And
Wow.
he said that LaVey just based it off of like a fictional book from this German guy, and stole that, and then just replaced like the Enochian Keys book. It just took that, and instead of God, he put the name devil in, and kind of like rewrote it a little bit.
I see.
And so Aquino thought it deserved a better rendition, so he went back and rewrote it. And I think it's like 2 volumes or something like that. It's very thick.
Well, I think it's funny that Aquino was he like he always approve or like to prove that he's innocent, like because that question I guess would come up to him a lot, and he'd be like, "Well, I've never been charged." That a super
Right.
reassuring thing you want to hear when you ask somebody, "Have you raped children?" Well, I've never been charged.
Yeah.
That sends you awesome confidence that guy you would love to have him around your children. But I just because again, I know I'm going to keep referencing Program to Kill because I'm reading that now, but
Yeah.
he was tied. Paul Bonacci. So anyone listening, Paul Bonacci was the one of the witnesses in the Franklin scandal, and he was horrible things. He was in rituals, sodomized, all these things, and then he gets arrested for perjury when no one else gets charged for it. But he like said that Michael Aquino was the guy that was get along with his crazy eyebrows. He was the guy that was involved in Iran Contra, giving like the cocaine to Larry King, who was using that to fuel drug parties, or they were exchanging cash or something like that. But it's amazing that he's tied into that scandal, like as well as so many others.
Yeah, and I can't remember if it was Bonacci or the other guy, Rusty Nelson, who had been the photographer for Larry King in the whole Franklin scandal. He also is in a video talking about Aquino, and he said that Aquino, he personally witnessed him receive a suitcase full of money, and he said that it had something to do with Iran Contra.
Mhm.
And what's weird is this was a long time ago, and especially with Paul, excuse me, Paul Bonacci, he actually references the Presidio and references some things that happened around that time. And this was before all these books and all these conspiracy theorists were really talking a lot about that. So it's odd that he knew so much about that
Mm.
at that time. And so it's like every time I start to think, well, maybe that people just picked Aquino to blame things on because if people don't know, was a really weird looking guy. And
Crazy
he's
eyeball.
dressed in black. Yeah. Huge eyebrows that went up like caterpillars. He says he was born with them. Um, and of course he dressed in all in black with like weird robes, and he had jet black hair. I'm sure he dyed it completely black, and it had the devil lock in the middle, kind of like the Misfits.
Yeah,
But kind of looked like a Dr. Spock, but not nearly as like he's
that's a good comparison. Yeah.
way even nerdier than Dr. Spock. So he was very stand out, and I thought that people were just blaming him. Maybe when I first got to looking into this, blaming him for the Presidio case, but I don't know. Now that I've looked into it deeper, it's like you see his name popping up in all these different cases or these different situations. Like he wrote the Mind War book for the military. It was like a white paper. It was like I think something like 20 pages, 25 pages, and it was all about psychological warfare. And he wrote that with or on behalf of this General Paul Vallely. And Paul Vallely here recently, I believe he's retired. He's very old now, but he's one of the main guys who promoted Q and said that Q was
No
real.
way.
And yeah, him and another even older general, his name escapes me right now, but
Oh
anyway, so
wow.
he was a big Q proponent. Said they were real. They were in the actual intelligence community, and they were helping, Trump because they people were trying to
Interesting,
overthrow
dude.
him. So, but I have to say this, Vallely, he got asked once Aquino's name got out there and was so controversial. He got asked about Aquino quite a bit, his relationship with him, and he claimed, that was really their only tie, was that one paper, and that he was recommended to him by other people because he was very, very good at psychological operations.
Dude, that's crazy about the Paul Valley thing. I just looked him up, and you're right. He was a Q supporter. But what it was even so like we both talked about the Franklin scandal before, and everyone should, if you guys don't know the Franklin scandal, go look it up. But it was a pedo ring with this Larry King guy. But um, oh my gosh, what was I gonna say? I found it crazy that all these people are just like the book that I read was the one by DeCamp, and
Mhm.
Senator DeCamp. He wrote this book all about pointing out all these things that went wrong and how evil it was. And it seems to be like a very open, honest book, which is surprising coming from a senator. And then I find out that DeCamp, so there was a plane crash, and I know but there was and the guy that was the lead investigator, he says he's like got everything he needs to bring down this pedo ring, and he flies with his son, his 8-year-old son, to the All-Star game. His plane crashes, but it doesn't just crash; it's spread out. The debris is spread out miles, which means it didn't fall out of the sky; it got blown out of the sky, and they took all of his work, they raided his house, everything. But so DeCamp, to investigate that plane crash, they hire William Colby, right? I think William Colby, and
Yep.
Colby was the director of the CIA. So and DeCamp worked with him in Vietnam with like and the Phoenix program, which was like terrorizing and torturing over 20,000 Vietnamese people. So this guy writing this book, like DeCamp and Cole, like these guys are clearly not honest people. They live through deceit. And just
Yeah.
it's like when I read that, I was like, holy shit, like how could you believe anything this man says? He willingly engaged in killing literally 20,000 Vietnamese civilians, some of them civilians, and now he's telling the truth. Like that, no,
Yeah.
these guys they lie for a living. And how much of what we read, like just like that, you say that valet, like these people are not honest people.
Yeah, that's true, man. It would be hard to trust anybody that was the head of the CIA.
Yeah.
But in in an interesting twist, though, I will say this about Colby. If I'm not mistaken, he was the one during Operation Mockingbird. I think you can watch the trials still on YouTube if they haven't taken them down. I'm sure they're up somewhere.
Yeah.
But and I suggest people watch them because they're pretty eye opening. But he was on there, and he actually was the one who admitted that the CIA had hired all these journalists. And apparently, there was a pretty big falling out in the intelligence community when he did that, and with the journalists, of course, too. But because I guess he was somewhat honest about it, and they didn't want that, of course, to come out. And so there are rumors even that Colby was killed. Uh,
Mm.
Colby was the one that he was going to be the main prosecutor, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, or help with the case of the Franklin scandal. And they wouldn't approve him. The board that they had together there locally in Omaha wouldn't approve him because he was controversial because of that Operation Mockingbird deal and stuff like that. So he had a mysterious death himself. Apparently, this
I
guy
didn't know
was the
that.
most meticulous guy you've ever met. Everybody says that he did things in a certain way, certain manner. He had some little house, I guess, a getaway place that he would go and he would fish. The camp even, I saw him in an interview describe, he said, I went with him fishing one time after they both got out of the military. He said that he was so meticulous about everything that it made him so nervous that he's like, I'll never fish with this guy again. I mean, he's like, he's hard to hang out with personally because he's just one of those people. But he apparently went alone after dark, got in his little tiny fishing boat and went out into the lake, and then turned up a couple days later drowned, and so everyone says there's no way he would ever go out at night like that. He was
Yeah.
older too, so you'd have to be crazy to kind of do that in a little tiny boat.
Right. And that's so like I was telling my friend Bob yesterday, like, I was like not like a full Q person, but I, was I guess I hope for the best or I don't know what, but I believe some of it. And then after that ended, and I always say you were instrumental in helping me get out of the Trump camp, but they I like took a step away from like that trafficking and all that other horrible stuff because and maybe it was a successful because of Q, but I was like, all right, so maybe, this happens. Yes, we have Jeffrey Epstein. We have like a few other events here, but I didn't like in this book reawaken me to like how prevalent these got that like goes hand in hand with intelligence. Like the one great quote was like, obviously, the CIA is behind drug trafficking. We can all, they are, if not the sole proponent, one of the largest proponents of drug trafficking in the world. So human trafficking is like a $10 billion a year industry 20 years ago. So God knows what it is today. So one would only assume that if they are in one illicit black market operation, you would probably take the guess that they are also involved in this other, black market human trafficking.
Right, exactly. And I did. I wasn't able to read Program to Kill, of course, but I did find an article today. It was apparently, and it may talk about this in the book, but apparently McGowan had written some articles talking about Aquino being linked to these child abuse scandals. And Aquino contacted him directly. And so he has their correspondence that he wrote back and forth.
No way. With David?
Yeah. And it was pretty interesting because they were really, I have to say, they both kept their composure pretty well, pretty professional, but it was intense. And
Damn, I'm gonna have to look these up.
yeah, I'll find that. It was on. There's I forget now. It's this one website that's got all kinds of conspiracy stuff, but it was really interesting.
Yeah, David McGuire. Anyone that's you got to read David McGuire. I've only now I'm on the second book of his, but he wrote one about the moon, I think too, right? Wag the
Wag the Moon Doggy or something
Yeah,
like
something like
that.
that. But he's an
Yeah,
awesome research. Like I compare, because as you read a lot too, like some of the conspiracy people, it's funny because you can see their biases come through. Like I told you, I read David Talbot's the CIA book, and it was great info about the beginnings of the CIA and all that stuff. But he makes the CIA out to be like a Republican Wall Street group, which it is, but they also hired, yeah, like in the 40s and 50s, they only hired, the top guys were Yale and Ivy League people, all people that were very liberally, like had liberal goals, whether they
yeah,
showed them or not, they were into like weird stuff. And so, and somebody who's like a researcher, you should be able to see like, okay, maybe they have an R next to their name or they're supporting Wall Street, but they're clearly very progressive values when like they're afraid of McCarthy. So if they're afraid of McCarthy, clearly they're doing something that you understand what I'm saying.
exactly. No, I do, man. And, we read some of the same stuff and similar books, and it's like you read these books that are these tell-alls about the CFR or like the hidden history book that you just covered. And it's like, and that one wasn't too bad as far as I'm sure those the authors probably lean to the left, but I don't know for sure.
Mhm.
But they did a pretty good job, I thought, from what I've read of it, with not showing their bias too much.
Right.
But I'm reading about the Fabian Society and different people like that, which are connected a lot to these CFR types. And it's like the line between liberal and conservative really gets blurred in there, and even the conservatives, a lot of those that belong to those different groups that want to control everything, they only have a few conservative tendencies, or they may just use the conservative or Republican moniker just for whatever reason, as a leverage, or that's the opening spot that they want to push for,
Mhm.
at the time, whatever. But they want global governance. They want all these things that really seem to be more left-leaning progressive. So it is hard to tell, and that is a turnoff when you read an author that is so biased.
Right.
And if I know I'm reading somebody, that's different. If I go into it and it's like, okay, I'm reading a guy who's a John Bircher, like Gary Allen, who I really like.
Right.
Uh, and I know he was Council for National Policy, but his great books were even before the
Yeah.
Council for
John's
National
gonna call
Policy.
in, dude, and yell
He's
at
gonna
you.
get me. But I mean, here's the way I look at it. I think now, and I kind of learned this from talking to John and his stuff about the Council for National Policy and the Ron Paul stuff, was I think every one of these guys, no matter who they are connected to some group. And that's the way our government works. It's like a mafioso. These people join
Right.
these groups for power, for leverage, to network and all these different things. And so I think I've had to kind of step back and say, okay, I think I need to, for one, I keep in mind that they belong to CFR, CNP, Bilderberg, whatever. But is their information correct and what they
Mhm.
wrote or what they said? Was that correct? Did it turn out to be right? And so that's kind of where I kind of go from now on. That's what I've been doing
Yeah, and that's what you
for the
have to
last few
do.
months.
'Cause, like, this
Yeah.
and another thing I found was, like, so I saw an article on The Independent. Do you ever see The Independent on Twitter?
Hmm.
They're
A little
super
bit.
left they're super
Yeah.
left-leaning, like crazy,
Yeah.
but they
Yeah.
wrote actually like, it's funny how every now and again, like, just like in a program, like, they write an article, maybe, like, they don't know what they're writing because they don't see the downstream effect, and then they have to quiet that article up, but so The Independent seems to do that a lot, but they wrote an article about the modern art movement in the 40s and the 50s, like Jackson Pollock and it was all CIA sponsored. That's how they
Yeah.
got their funding. And the reason why, according to this article, they did it was because they were fighting commies and they wanted to show, oh, look, because communism would say America has no culture. And they're like, no, look how we're growing. We have all this jazz and all this, we were like in the renaissance of new art. And, but the CIA funded the modern art movement. So like, clearly they're not these traditional staunch Republican Wall Street people because they're supporting modern art. I would say is like a gateway to progressivism and degeneracy and all what we have our pop culture today. So if they're sponsoring modern art, what else are they pushing out that's beyond modern art that's more
Right.
powerful?
Right. Exactly, man. And as we were talking about, it's kind of hard to draw the line and the bias and stuff. It's like another guy that comes to mind to me is Carol Quigley. This guy was very left
Mm,
leaning. He could not stand right wing, the hard right. I mean, he talked really badly about them. Yet he's exposing this whole group, the Milner Group, and the CFR, and the Chatham House, and all that stuff. Which today we kind of see them as left leaning. Back in the day, certain people said they were right leaning, but like we said, the lines are really blurred, and it's the same circles that run with the CIA and all that. And these guys are culture creators. They do that because they know that culture is the easiest way to influence people. We're suckers for commercialism, and especially when you're young, whatever's marketed to you, that's the type of music you're going to like. That's the type of movies you're going to like. I'm
that's true.
guilty of it as just as bad as
Yes. Yep.
anybody. I come out of the grunge era, so that's the kind of music I still like.
You're right.
But you know, uh, they push this stuff, and we know, from different people who investigate it that Hollywood is all in bed with the military industrial complex and the CIA and different people like that, or different organizations like that.
Is it the quote, politics downstream from culture? Isn't that the quote?
I
I
think
think that's the
so. Yeah.
expression. Yeah, but that's so I mean, these people like it's definitely I didn't know Carol Quigley also he's like a left-leaning guy.
Yeah. Yeah. He really talked a lot. He hated McCarthy. He thought Republicans were ignorant. He kind of talked about how they think, and it's true to a certain point. They blamed everything on communism, all these things that were happening, but they didn't. And it's because they didn't have the information. But I guess
Yeah.
he was the main one that brought the information. A lot of that stuff just wasn't known at the time. But he said they blamed everything on communism when all along it was like the Rockefellers and Milner Group and the CFR and that whole, Rothschilds and all those different ones. I said Rothschilds because I was corrected recently by my Pilgrim Society guy. He said it was Red Shield is where that came from, and it's
Right.
Rothschilds. And I was like, I knew that, but I just
Yeah.
still said Rothschilds.
Ah, that's interesting, dude. That was probably a good.
Yeah,
I'll have to listen to that episode.
yeah. He's pretty knowledgeable about that stuff.
Yeah, but there's that whole like pedophile like ring and stuff, and I hate like you because I worry about censors, but it's so like it's just crazy like how deep it goes. Like you were saying with Aquino and the military, like I read one part how like all these bases, like the daycare centers they had, there was like let's say 50 kids and 40 of them had chlamydia of all under the age of 7, clearly like done by these adults, these, and they were taken off campus, or people would have underground uh, cells and chambers and selling videos. And then they would the military would get caught, and it was like in the 80s, so it was before the internet. They would demolish the building or would start a fire, and everyone would get away scot-free. Like it's so rampant. And I, like I said, I've like stepped away from that with after Q, because I was like, all right, but maybe that was its job, because now I realize again, like, and it's only increasing, like with the internet, with internationalism and globalism. Now this is skyrocketing. And there was also last, and then you can like in 1999, they passed this law that you can't arrest somebody for virtual pornography. So if you have a child depicted in a pornography, if it's virtual, that is your First Amendment right. That set precedent in California. So you can see where that goes. Well, anytime a picture is on, someone has a stockpile of 5,000 videos. Well, how can you prove that these are virtual children as opposed to real children? Like the whole thing is set up against us, against these kids.
Yeah, yeah, and that kind of goes back to the Franklin scandal. The three main witnesses who were there and seen the stuff. Well, they treated them like the villains, and the people who were really the accused, they got off scot free because they were all connected and all a part of a network, I think. So you see right there, and even with some of these girls who accused Jeffrey Epstein and that whole crew of doing stuff, they got treated pretty badly too. And this is the time of Me Too, so
Right.
yeah, it's really the deck is stacked against the abused. It's really a horrible, horrible thing. And if the powers that be won't do anything, you know, what can be done really?
And I also found it because I had one guy on Philip Fairbanks, and he wrote a book, Pedogate Primer. After reading this book, I realized that he literally just kind of copied Program to Kill and like redid it, which is okay. He still wrote the book. So if I, not that he listens, but go read his book too. But it's pretty much like just a shorter of this one. But I heard these things before from him, but like the CIA created this group called the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, because all this stuff in the 80s is coming out. Satanic panic is widespread, probably because they're hearing articles about little kids saying people in hoods are defecating on me and making me eat it, and they're chanting, and so they need to mock these moms of satanic panic. And then they create this false memory syndrome, which was by two couples, the elderly something, and they were accused and convicted pedophiles. So funny, they're running this group, but they would go and destroy testimony of little kids that are claiming they're being these horrible, horrible things like don't even want to talk about. So you guys can use your imagination. And that was a CIA funded group. It was funded by them to destroy these kids who are probably already so broken, and they are so young and don't really understand what's going on. They would send these two to go defend pedophiles, probably mostly upper echelon pedophiles, and to make these kids sound like they were making up these stories. How a 5-year-old makes up they're being sodomized and goat innards and horrible stuff. But it's crazy.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, man, what is the purpose of some of this? It's so grotesque. and it has to be, some form of evil that's almost beyond our imagination. Even just hurting a kid is beyond the imagination of most regular people.
Mhm.
Even some bad people, that's like the lowest thing there is hurting a
Mm.
child. And so I, I can only think that these people are into some really, really dark stuff. And that's the only thing that makes sense to me because the level of the grotesque uh, abuse in some of the things that I know you're talking about, it's just beyond imagination. It's just horrible. It's
Well,
inhuman.
that's what, so, like, I was thinking, like, so when would this have begun? Like, is this a new phenomenon? Did it, obviously, child brides and things like that have always happened, but you never heard of, or so I was thinking, like, when has this grotesque stuff been around forever? And even Sigmund Freud, who I have mixed feelings on Freud, because isn't his nephew, who's his nephew? The propagandist.
Oh yeah, Edward Bernays.
Right, Bernays. So I associate Freud as being a psycho, but he, like, thought of this question, and he made this connection that his patients were having these, they were talking about these, like, ritual abuse things that had happened to them as children, and it was similar as things as the witchcraft in the 16th centuries, like what they were accusing these people of doing, like, blood and animals and all this stuff like that. And not just, I'm not just talking about Salem, all over Europe they were having witchcraft trials, and they're the same, like the same exact things they talked about, like blood, bleeding a chicken dry and using the blood in ceremonies and all this stuff like that. It's been going on forever. So what makes me think is, clearly this is a long practice that has been going on since, I don't, since when, I don't know. Like, I guess that adds credence to, like, the secret societies of old and Freemasonry grabbing these practices and taking them with them. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, yeah. Like putting your children through the fire, like the Bible said not to do, and talked about sacrificing the kids to Moloch and different things like that. Um, yeah, I think it's probably happened probably forever, and with these groups, like the government and even the private sector, the very wealthy elite who seem to always run around or are connected to the top levels of government, they have so much power and ability to do these things in secret because they've got the money, they've got the manpower, they they have the guns.
Right.
They have the power to kill you if you find out, and you get Epstein. So
Well,
it's disturbing to think about. I have
and
kids, and
I heard about this story with, oh God, I have in my notes, but he was doing the late night tours in Washington. I'll find his name, but maybe you'll know it before I will. During George Bush's presidency, but he was this
oh,
guy. Oh, God,
that was the guy. Was he connected to the Franklin scandal?
I think he was connected with it somehow. I'm gonna find. Oh, wait. Craig Spence was his name.
Yeah, yeah,
So Craig Spence, for anybody, he was behind. He was kind of like a Larry King type figure of the Franklin scandal, but he was in D.C. and he would supply, young boys to the elite of both political parties, just because he had an R next to his name. His go-to guy, or his base of operations, was a Democrat, but he had all this black surf. He was like Epstein of the 80s, right? And
yeah, yeah.
cocaine, two-way mirrors, all this stuff. And when it broke, even though it's a Republican scandal, New York Times, Washington Post, all ignored it, of course, because they don't actually care. Maybe their journalists think they care, but they don't actually care. And then after they put a gag order, sealed over 20,000 court documents for Craig, and then he was found dead 5 months later at the Ritz Hotel in Boston. And he wrote like to somebody, I may be disappearing soon. It will be sudden. It may appear to be suicide, but it won't be. And then on the bathroom mirror, he wrote, Chief, consider this my resignation, effective immediately. You can't ask others to make a sacrifice if you are not ready to do the same. Life is duty. God bless America.
That guy. So I read the other book about the Franklin scandal. I think it's called the Franklin One's called the Franklin cover up. The
Yeah,
other is the
that's
Franklin
the one I
scandal.
read, the Franklin
Okay,
cover.
so I read the Franklin scandal too, and that guy Nick, I'm blanking on his last name, but
I know
he
you.
has a lot in there about Craig Spence, and it's very interesting. And Craig apparently would just brag at these parties that he was connected, or he would say, "I'm in the CIA,"
Mhm.
and many people witnessed that, and people didn't know what to think about him. Apparently, he was like really one of these loud guys who loved to brag and talk about himself and what he could do and stuff like that. And he, you know, there was never any solid proof that he was actually in the CIA, but he was definitely an asset.
Right.
And he had CIA goons that would come to those parties. And there's one guy, I forget his name, but he was a guy who ran an escort service, a male escort service. But there was no underage stuff going on. And
Mhm.
somehow, I guess Craig Spence had used him a few times. So Craig decided to hire him and Larry King. And after a few months, they said, we want underage guys. And he's like, I can't do that. And he's like,
Interesting.
basically, you're going to do that. And
Yeah.
he was, and the author of that book, he actually went and found this guy and interviewed him, kind of bugged him until he gave in and told him everything. And so he said that somebody showed up after he refused the second time and totally knocked all the windows out of his house,
Damn.
stole stuff from his home, visited his sister's house, those kinds of things. So he ended up going back and working with them, but still refused to do that, and eventually ended up just fleeing and trying to get away from them. But he said for sure there was CIA guys all around Spence.
Dude, and that, like you said earlier, that we have the guns. Like that's and like that because most normal people be like, oh well, if this is happening on a widespread scale, why it never comes out? It never comes. But they have the power to shut down anything. And like there was a story in Belgium. This guy, dude, he literally had like 6,000 kids that he stole at, like over the course of his. He gets arrested halfway, like with 8 girls or little girls are missing. They're like found. He gets 4 years. He only does 3 months. He gets out. Girls start missing again. And like it goes on for 6 more years. They get him again because he's got literal dungeons and 6 houses, but he doesn't have a job. He has 6 houses, but no job on government assistance. And so then their lead prosecutor, he gets pulled off the case. Another guy, he gets pulled off the case. And then the judge, he like makes sure that it all stays quiet. The judge gets promoted to work as a justice person at The Hague for the European Commission. I don't know you would probably know what The Hague is. I've heard that term, that phrase, but they just cover it up, dude. They have the power to stop anything they want.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The first little girl, I forget her name, but she doesn't get much attention in the Franklin scandal. But she was the first one to come out and say that she was abused, and she accused the sheriff there in the town,
Mhm.
and the sheriff was connected to the main, I believe it was the main FBI guy. Like I think they went to the same college or something like that, and they were good friends. And he same as told her, I'll say that you're lying. You're not going to be you're not going to ruin his name by
Right.
accusing him of that. And she had some horror. I mean, she was the first one to say, there was Satanism involved. There were rituals involved. She described it to a T. It was really grotesque stuff. So yeah, man, there's no, I don't know how you would beat these guys.
Yeah.
All I can say is people watch your children
Yeah.
because this is real. I mean, lots and lots of kids go missing every year, and that's just a fact. And
Well,
God
and
forbid that.
also the kids go missing, and that number is disputed. Like I've seen things like 1 million kids go missing in the United States a year. I've seen that number. That's all those people that are called missing, but they're found. They never remove that number. But you know what? We don't know because the FBI doesn't keep track. So why in the hell would the FBI not keep track of missing kids? That may like unless okay, so either they don't care, or B, maybe they're totally incompetent and they can't do it, but they can find January 6th protesters, or C, because they're told not to and they don't want the American public to know how many kids are stolen in the United States each year.
Yeah, and with the media that we have, any type of suggestion about these things, if they want to cover something up, they just act like it's a conspiracy, act like
Mhm.
the notion is totally ridiculous. And, at least half the people believe that, probably more than that.
Probably, yeah, or
Um,
don't care.
yeah. So it's just it's a hell of a racket they got. It's scary to think about. And I don't know. I mean, if they've got the power and they can control the news, I mean, I don't know what we do about it, but I tell you, I mean, I think that everything's going to come to light eventually, and whether I live to see it or not, and I hope I do. But it's horrible that we live in that kind of world where we have to worry about our kids and family members and young friends and stuff like that. It's insane that that's what we
What's
live.
what's going to happen with because Ghislaine Maxwell, as we all know, or she's supposedly on trial, or I'm going to Google when you're talking. Do they take photos of federal cases? Because I've no one's seen a photo of her. What's your take on what's going to happen with Ghislaine?
I hesitate to make a prediction because God knows what will happen next. We've had so many crazy stories, especially in the last few weeks, and the whole Rittenhouse drama. It was so crazy, but I just can't imagine them really letting her bring anybody big down. Maybe one or two, but it would be hard even for me to imagine that. I think they'll keep it pretty quiet.
Yeah.
And like they had the OJ trial, and everybody watched that. That's kind of what kicked all this stuff off on the cable news. But I bet you they won't even show much of her trial.
Well, so I just they do this is what they always say, for the benefit of others, they won't so they don't use photographs or video cameras in federal court proceedings because they don't want to distract trial participants or create prejudiced trial outcomes, depriving defendants of their fair trials. But state crimes, it's okay. They that makes sense. That sounds like Woody Allen, like how he's a pedophile. They didn't charge him with molesting his daughter because they didn't want to cause more trauma to his 8-year-old daughter that he already molested. That's like their reasonings are always so, they just think we're stupid. What like
Yeah,
what are they saying today? Like why inflation is good for the country or whatever why it's this is why it's good not to have a small family because it's expensive. They literally want us to think we are stupid.
yeah. Oh yeah, they do, and have the people just suck it up and act like they believe it, whether they do or not. Yeah, it's all they have to do is give a lame excuse, and that's pretty much it because there's no accountability in any real way. I mean, what are people going to do about it? Nothing.
Yeah.
Complain about it.
That's it, dude. And then we'll go back to arguing about, whatever infrastructure bill or whatever we like to argue about amongst each other because it's just so much easier.
Yeah, it's like they have these things that they push out there to get us arguing. We've talked about this a ton. I think that one of the biggest ones, it seems like, is immigration. They can always push that out. They're at the borders. They're coming to get us.
You're so
You know,
right.
you know what I mean? And like, and that's a kind of the thing. I see both sides of that because I don't want to see anybody suffering, but at the same time, they do use that to overwhelm the system and get things done with the welfare state. That's kind of like the Cloward Piven strategy: overwhelm the system so you can create the social governance.
Mhm.
So I see both sides of it, but that's one that both people, on both sides, the left and the right, get really wired and really upset about. And nobody, like, every society from the beginning of time has worried about foreign invaders. So part of
Right.
that is natural.
Yes.
You got to use some common sense about it. So they know they can go to that one anytime and just totally divide the people right down the middle. And they've got all
Yeah.
these other things too now. The Rittenhouse thing, the guy that just drove through the crowd. They're just throwing
Oh
these things
my
at us
God.
like left and right, and it's like I really liked what your friend Bob said. You know, he said, "Could Rittenhouse be the what's her
Greta
name,
Greta
Greta, the
Thun yeah.
Greta of the right?" And you know, it got me to thinking because I was, you know, I'm not saying that he shouldn't have been acquitted or anything like that, but something was just not right about it to me. It seemed like maybe it was the way people handled it. Maybe that was the thing that wasn't right. It just seemed
Dude, did
like
you know
on
they're born on the same day, the
the
same
same
year?
day. Yeah,
Same year. What are the
it
odds
just
of that, dude?
yeah, really strange.
But yeah, it's the that whole like this it's just like a never it's bombarding like it makes you worried for families like they just are that are on opposite ends of that political spectrum and it's they're just getting pounded like
Yeah,
and you, like how you said also I liked how you said anything that like comes out in the media that they'll need to tie to a conspiracy. My fiance, her mom and sister, big CNN followers, and she I don't know why she does this like embarrass me because I just stay silent, but she'll be like, look at Adele. She's got Saturn earrings, Saturn tattoo, Saturn symbol, and all this stuff. But anytime like she touches on something real, because she hears what I say and picks up pieces, they'll immediately go like, "Oh, that's sounding a little bit like QAnon stuff." And so just like that, dude, like if I don't ever open my mouth because I would,
oh
but
yeah,
like if I
yeah,
ever brought up a act like the Franklin scandal or anything that's legitimately happened, even though it's real, there because of that powerful propaganda, they will be immediately be able to write it off as nonsense because of mainstream news and QAnon and all that stuff.
yeah. And I may have mentioned this before on your show, but just the simple notion of a push for a world government or globalism. Yeah, you go back in the early 1900s, and you can see newspaper headlines, and even when the news TV news got popular, they were talking about it then, pretty open about world government. You know, they're pushing for the League of Nations and all that stuff. And if you even suggested something like that in mainstream news, you know, for the last since I've been paying attention, 25 years, they would act like you're crazy, tinfoil hat, new world government, new world order. Like you can go and see dozens of quotes by famous, powerful men talking about it,
Right.
but all they have to do is act like it's a crazy notion, you know,
Yeah.
and people think it is.
Dude, they're just so powerful. I wanted to bring up oh, last topic and then we can but I saw did you see Belarus's I'll share my screen. How do you say it? Belarus, the country? Well, regardless, hit their president, Lukashenko, he was on an interview on the BBC. Did you see this?
No, I didn't see it. No.
Let me share the screen.
Yeah.
I won't be able to play it because he's speaking in Belarus, or I don't know what language they speak in because I'm a stupid American. But basically, though,
I
the
don't either.
BBC was talking to him because he's kind of brutal. Like so his quotes are basically he says because he kicked out all the NGOs that are in his country, and they're saying like, why would you do that? They're just trying to better for the people. And he said like he killed this one lady, and he said she's a Western agent. She ate her passport. That's her business. And he said how he would liquidate any NGOs in Belarus. And I think he was the guy that refused to shut down during COVID and the IMF, like said how they tried to bribe him with $1 billion and he
Oh
wouldn't do
wow.
it. I'm pretty sure that was him as well. But I just,
Wow.
it's funny how Eastern Europe, even though I'm sure it's still controlled, it's nice to like Poland, guarding its borders and all these, like, it's funny that Eastern Europe, it's like still is almost like in this, we're way gone. America, we are so far screwed up and corrupted. And so are these countries, but like there's still a sense of nationalism that exists that's not vilified and ridiculed. But I just I'll send you the link when we're done. But I just found that
Yeah.
awesome that he was like, oh, these NGOs are scum. You're all financing to ruin countries. And I
Oh,
don't,
that's great.
yeah,
It's the truth, man. Yeah, you and I know that these NGOs, you know, they're big pushers of global governance. You know, that's one of their big things, whether it be environmentalism or the military industrial complex ones like the Atlantic Council and CFR and all that. That's what they do. I mean,
Right.
and their agents are everywhere trying to undermine everything, any nationalism whatsoever, any pride in your country or the place you live. They want to destroy that. And it's not because they think your country's gonna become another Hitler type of situation. We've talked about that
You're
too.
right.
They don't want nationalism because they don't want any countries independent. They want to keep them dependent on their international goods and
Mhm.
loans and all that. And that's what it all comes down to.
Yeah, and I also now after reading this, like the globalism, it makes also it's a great way to if you have a global government, you can shut down anything just as quick as it begins. You can corruption can that top level is truly untouchable. Where in
Yeah.
a smaller population, you'd probably be able to maybe make better change, but on a global scale, I can't do
Yeah.
anything to stop what happens in India if it's a one world government. But yeah. Well, dude,
Yeah.
I
It's
appreciate you. I didn't mean to cut you off. I didn't know if go ahead.
no, no, I was just gonna say that to what you said there. Yeah, it's like to think about how you could control some kind of global governance or mechanism. And for all the left wing people that may or may not be listening, like if you think that once you have, because their whole thing is globalism, the first excuse they said that they wanted to create a world government was like to end all wars. Even Cecil
Mhm.
Rhodes said that.
Yeah.
And so if they created a one world government, then the war is solely on the people
Right.
because wars are not going
That's a
to end.
great point. That's a
So
great point.
it's something I think that's something people need to think about.
Wow, that's an awesome quote to end the show on, dude. If there are no wars, the war is on us.
Yeah.
Oh, well, man, it's always thank you for doing this on Thanksgiving. We had a decent audience size for Thanksgiving, so it was really great. Where can everyone find you and support your show?
Yeah. So you can find me on Twitter or Instagram at underscore the odd man out. And it's got the links to my show and my other links in the bio, the link tree. I'm also on Gab and it's just the odd man out on there. So yeah,
Nice. No
thanks.
underscore.
No underscore. No
Got it.
underscore. So thanks for having me on, man. It's been a great time as always, and happy
Yeah.
Thanksgiving.
Hey, dude, you guys go check out. He's like I said, he's always 3 books ahead of me. So go check him out, and then I'll come up and be the caboose. But Odd Man's leading the way. So thanks, dude, and we'll talk soon.
Cool, man. Thank
All
you.
right, take care.
Bye.